Hello and welcome to the League of Logic podcast. It is our hope that through this podcast you will learn how to think for yourself. Check out our website, leagueoflogic.com. You will find some study tools in there that will help you understand some of the topics that we cover and let you know a little bit more about what we're doing. We also have an app that is available on the App Store and on Google Play Store. Please, if you would, leave us a rating and review on the podcast platform you're using. It would go a long way in helping us getting the word out. Also, if you're watching on one of our video channels, like, subscribe, whatever button you got to push to keep up with the channel. Thank you for listening to the League of Logic podcast. Now, as always, get ready for a much-needed conversation about truth.
Where's Ric Flair?
Woo!
Thank you.
So I didn't have Andrew staring at me the whole time. It felt a little different this time doing the intro.
Yeah. It's all right. I was writing down notes.
Brian's wearing an invisible cloak today.
Yeah. He still has his coffee pot.
Hmm.
And it muffles his sound a little bit.
Yeah.
The cloak of invisibility.
You can hear me today, but you cannot see me.
Ninja.
Sound a little bit like Darth Vader.
I am your father.
Oh, man. Y'all have a good Christmas.
I had a very good Christmas.
Santa Claus good to everybody.
Well, Santa Claus, he didn't show up at my house, but my wife did, and she brought a lot of gifts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty nice. I got a lot of cool things.
What'd you get? What was the coolest thing you got?
Oh, man, let me think about it.
Make sure it's from her.
That's all he got was.
Yeah.
So, probably the coolest thing was, I don't know where she got it, but she went on like either Facebook Marketplace or eBay or something like that, and she bought this big lot of Nerf guns, and she put them in a box and gave them to me, so I got a boatload of Nerf guns now.
Ready for the war.
Mm-hmm. I told her last night, I was like, man, with this new shotgun, we got to get up with Sarah and make something happen. We need to make a little invitation.
That'd just right up her alley, man. She would love it.
Mm-hmm. So that was the coolest thing. And then she also got me a 10-ton snatch block. I don't have anything that can pull 10
what?
tons. A little snatch block. It's basically like a pulley that can be placed anywhere along the rope. You don't have to feed the rope through it. You can just take the pulley and put it on the rope there.
Got to have a pretty strong rope.
Cool.
To hold 10 tons.
Yeah, I looked at the rope and it would only pull 200 before it snapped.
200 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's a lot. That's a far cry from 10 tons.
It
That's
is.
20,000 pounds.
it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So yesterday we actually went back to Tractor Supply and we traded that one for a 5-ton one. And then I also got a couple shackles.
She wants those trees cleaned up.
That's
That was
what
the
it is.
message.
I got all the trees cleaned up.
You need to cut more down then.
I do need to cut more down,
There's
actually.
a message behind that present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I was pumped about it.
She may want the house slid over 10 feet.
Well,
So
I can't do it
still
now.
have plenty of firewood from the first time.
Yeah, all of our firewood has fallen over. Yep, it's just.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You mentioned that.
Yep, it's.
But you still have plenty, though, right?
Yeah, still have plenty. And the dogs every day drag like a couple more pieces out into the yard.
Nice.
Yay, dogs.
Guess, as man, I'm glad I don't have animals. I like animals. I like dogs. But I tell you, the benefits of not having a dog far outweigh the benefits of having a dog.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't have to worry about a dog. That wins over having to worry about a dog.
I don't worry about my dog because I just have earth stuff out in my yard. I don't have anything important to me out there that's
You have
not.
to feed it.
Yeah,
You
but
have to feed it. About
but
water.
I don't worry about it.
Oh.
That's just like a added responsibility that I
Yeah.
chose to take on.
I can't do it. I'm an irresponsible human being. It's tough.
Yeah.
Grown man, irresponsible.
Yeah.
Brian, what'd you get for Christmas?
I got a couple knives, some little fancy gadget that I would have no way of describing. It's got like a little, well, I guess I could describe it. It's like a Leatherman tool mixed with a little hatchet, and it's kind of interesting. I had to show it to you sometime. One very interesting thing I got from Megan is a book of very important documents called The Constitution of the United States of America and Selected Writings of the Founding Fathers.
Cool.
That's
I
awesome.
have found this to be very helpful this week.
Cool.
That is awesome. That was almost like a segue into what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah, what are we
Yeah,
going to talk
yeah.
about today?
I wasn't ready for it.
I want to break tradition.
Okay.
Let's not forget about the Christmas gift card.
Oh yeah, we got a gas.
Oh,
card
my
giveaway.
goodness.
We didn't do it. Brian did the reading. He didn't
You
know
know
who it
what?
was.
Yeah, I didn't know who it was. I didn't mention it, so I meant to ask about that, and I forgot.
Well, I was prepared before I got here. We were actually prepared. I meant to tell Brian and I forgot, so that's all my fault. But we did have a winner, and it was Pro America. Do we know who that is? Pro America.
Good job, Pro America.
Pro America sounds like somebody I would like,
Yeah,
but I don't know who that is.
I think it
it's Chad.
is Chad Barber.
Chad Barber, you are the winner of a gas card.
And just because it's a gas card, you can use it for diesel as well.
Yes, diesel fuel. It will buy diesel fuel.
It will buy diesel fuel.
Don't force it. Don't
Mm-mm,
force it.
mm-mm.
All right, I'll give you that card so you can give it to him tomorrow. Take your beating. Oh man,
Okay.
so what's it like having a drink you have to chew on the way down?
I don't know. Like, it tastes good, but I've always been conflicted about drinks you got to chew on the way down.
Yes, milkshake kinda.
Yeah.
It's got Oreo in it or something.
Yeah. But this is pretty good. And at least it looks healthy.
Yeah, I guess it does.
Looks very Spanish as well.
It's shaped like a woman.
That's a perk. Yep. Fits in the hand really nicely.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what it even says?
Yeah, it says Lala.
Other than that, since it's in Spanish.
It was
Do
close.
you have any clue what you're eating or drinking?
Yeah. It's a yogurt smoothie.
Oh.
Yeah. With 5 grams of protein, real fruit, and probiotics.
Mm.
It's a little on-the-go breakfast right there.
Pooping bugs. That's what a probiotic is.
I love pooping bugs. I never knew that my life was so bad until I started taking probiotics. I was like, what? You're supposed to poop like this? I was like, this is great.
No more need for the handrails.
Yep. It was awesome. And I've been taking it ever since. And I told my mom, and she was like, I told you to be taking probiotics. And I was like, yeah. But I still found it by myself.
Mm-hmm. All by yourself. Well, I got for Christmas, I got a replica of the Constitution it's really nice. I got to frame it. It's one of those type. I hadn't framed it yet.
Ooh,
And the Bill of Rights. One
That's
of those.
cool.
Yep. So if it, I don't know what, I'll bring it when I get it framed, and we'll set it up in front of the table just for fun one day.
That'd be cool.
that'd be cool.
And I got a shirt that said I was a patriot, but I've been wearing it, so it was dirty. I couldn't wear it today. So today I'm just freedom.
Yeah. Well.
Freedom.
Yeah. This book I have looks pretty nice as well. Fancy looking book. Looks nice on a shelf. But it's got the Bill of Rights, got the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and many other writings, including the Federalist Papers, Common Sense, stuff like that, all into one book. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Does it have a section written? What does it have the separation of church and state written out in there for you?
Not defined, but it does make some comments on that.
It's interesting. You know why it doesn't have it in there? Because it's not a written document that says anything about the separation of church and state.
Not in the
Right.
Constitution.
It's a
Yeah, those words are not used.
not at all. So where does it come from then?
It comes from the interpretation of the First Amendment.
An explanation. Actually, first person to ever use it was an English theologian named Richard Hooker in the 1500s, who had nothing to do with the founding of America.
He had more money than the poor hooker. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. That's funny though. I don't care who you are.
I forget.
Funny to me.
Yeah. I think obviously our topic today is going to be on just separation of church and state, and it's probably going to last a while. This year, 2022, it's a new year, right? And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. One, you got an election year coming up, and that's important. And we're going to explain why over the next few episodes and why it's important and what it actually means. And one of the some of the feedback that we have been receiving over this, it's just been a short period of time that we've been doing this podcast, man. It's not been long at all. And so some of the feedback we've been getting is how are all these political and society type issues related to church or religion? You see what I mean? Or why would anyone who was claiming to be Christian based be worried about it? Because it is what it is. I mean, I've heard lots of comments and stuff. And the last one that I had, which really sort of hit home was, I mean, it was like a direct thing. The church should not be involved at all because of the separation of church and state. I thought that's interesting. And so it made me want to say, maybe want to look into if that was real or not, because, I mean, I had always, on the surface, I had already made up my mind that was not right. But, I mean, I heard it. Better check it out, make sure it's true or not true, right? So that's what we've been doing this week. The main thing that I want to be keeping in mind throughout all the discussions that we ever have here, particularly the ones where we it may seem as if all we're doing is throwing off on the dumb Democrats or the liberals or political issues that don't seem to make sense. And while we do make fun of those things, it's just using humor to state the obvious, and that is that there is a contradictory element in all of this. And if we are to be looking for the truth and aspects of everything, we need to make sure we do that. And so I don't ever want to come off as well, all we do is just bash a bunch of people. There's a point behind it. There's a purpose. And it is to point out the hypocrisy and the flaws, and what we'll see later on throughout these next few weeks in podcasts, the actual evil and the spiritual battle that's taking place all around us in every aspect of our life, because it influences every area. Spiritual battles don't just happen inside of a church, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual battles don't just happen to believers. It's everywhere. And so we're going to it's a huge topic. And so as not to be overwhelming on that, we're going to take baby steps and we're going to walk through it. And we're going to start with the political side and where we are here and what the church's role should be involved in a country of any kind, in particular the United States of America, a country founded on Christian values.
I'm going to be a bad guy.
Okay?
I don't care about party lines, Republican or Democrat.
Me neither.
But I think something, if you claim to be a Christ follower, something you really need to stop and look at. If you're a Christ follower and you say you're a progressive, you need to question things. Mm-hmm. If you're not a conservative. And this discussion we're going to have on the separation of church and state will bring that to light.
Absolutely.
It really needs to be something. Forget the parties and stuff.
Well, the couple of questions you need to ask yourself are, do I believe in the Bible? Am I a Christ follower? And if that's true, then that will set your affiliation. And it's not a party affiliation. It is an individual candidate affiliation. and what they stand for.
Yep.
And so where we've had this line that has been muddied, the water has been so muddied for us, is because we have this thing now that everyone always refers to as the separation of church and state. And what it has become, or what people believe it is not what it actually is, or what it was intended to be in the first place. And probably what it was intended to be will confuse a lot of people, even the ones who are conservative and think that it was supposed to be a God thing, which, I mean, it was, but there's a lot of things about it that were a little different. What you got? You got some notes over there?
Yeah, I got a couple notes. The only one that applies really is something that really is hard for me to keep in my mind, but it's extremely important, is that politics and all that is a distraction. You know, like in the sense of spiritual battle and spiritual warfare. You know, there's a lot of things that are, I believe, on this earth that we have to do that often can become a distraction to pull away from the main goal of why we're here. You know, I know why I'm here as a Christian, and I know that God's going to take care of me, but different things can become distractions. If I become too obsessed with politics, it's distracting, and I lose sight of that spiritual battle. If I get too focused on my job, it becomes a distraction, and I'll lose sight of that spiritual battle. And so politics is just one of those ones that's really easy to put me in a bad mood, or to, you know, or just to easily, oh, the world's going to come to an end, you know, everything's out of control, there's no hope. And it's just an easy one for me to get distracted on.
How do you define politics?
Well, in this sense, specifically governmental politics, whenever it comes to, you know, the laws that are being established and, you know, what the president is doing and all that stuff, specifically governmental wise, not so much as the politics of like the church or the politics of your household or the politics of your job. I mean, those politics can become distractions as well, but in this sense, talking about the governmental politics.
What you think, Brian? It's hard, you're not here. I can't look at you, but I don't want to forget you're there.
Yeah, I'm listening. I think they can be distractions. You're talking about governmental politics, especially, you know, with the topics and things that, you know, the mainstream media pushes are very much distractions and can be. But I think on the same thing, we do live in this country, and we are included in the people that make the choices in elections that guide where this country goes. So we still have to take thought on it and think about it from, you know, an aspect of, is this going toward truth? Is this for the good of the people?
Yeah, it's definitely something that, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't think about it. Like, you should definitely think about the politics and what your role as a Christian is, or as a person is in those politics. I'm just saying you can obsess about it. You know, to put it in a different light, you know, I can obsess on keeping my job as much as I want, but ultimately, as a Christian, at the end of the day, even though I may get a check from Ambit Plumbing, God's the one that's going to be taking care of me. Mm-hmm. And so if Ambit Plumbing says, Andrew, we need you to go fix this guy's plumbing and then kill this one guy. Well, I can't do that. Well, you're fired. You know, I shouldn't be so focused on trying to keep that job that it conflicts with what I think I need to do spiritually. Mm-hmm. And so,
right,
you know, no matter what happens in the governmental politics today with the Republicans or Democrats or news or the president, I need to be involved and I need to know what's happening and how I need to respond to that. But there's too much to lose to let it to obsess over it.
Is it possible?
I think this goes back to what we've talked about is starting points. You've got to know where your starting point is. What is your fundamental beliefs that you stand on? Are you standing on truth or are you not? You got to know what you believe, and to be able to dictate the decisions that you make when those situations and circumstances come to you, like, losing your job or a moral dilemma in your job. You got to already know ahead of time, this is what I stand on. This is what I believe on this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that one of the greatest spiritual battles that is being fought right now is fought in the political realm?
I think the greatest would be fought on the individual realm.
And let me ask you this. If having a job at Ambit Plumbing, and the way you said, ultimately God's going to take care of you, I guess one of the things that I'll just ask you, do you have obligations as an employee, biblically, according to God's instruction, as an employee at Ambit Plumbing?
Obligations, I'm lost. What are you
Are
saying?
there ethical things in the Bible?
Does the
As
Bible
as
tell
an
you how to
employee.
be an employee?
Yes, the Bible definitely tells you how to be an employee.
I think that's the part that gets missed.
Yep.
With politics.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of saying, yeah, I'm an employee of Ambit Plumbing, but ultimately God's going to take care of me. And somehow you miss all the things in the Bible about how God has instructed you to be an employee. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it has become a distraction,
Mm-hmm.
but that's by design, and it didn't come from God.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly
I
right.
think
He's exactly right. What he's saying is that the whole separation of church and state, that the church should not be involved in politics, is the distraction. That the church should not be involved in politics. That is the distraction, when the church should very much be involved in politics. And I'm just going to give you a couple of definite. For one, there is no such thing as a political issue.
Yep.
Politics is simply a process of discussion issues, whether they be environmental or criminal or marriage. It's just a method of discussion. And so we've been hoodooed by the word politics and made to think that is something by itself, and it is not. It's just a process. So political issues, there's no such thing. There are issues, again, environmental, moral issues. And so to say that the church can't be involved in politics is to say that the church can't be involved in issues, which is a lie. The church is always involved in issues.
To say the church has no voice in that discussion is what it's saying.
That's a lie. So we have an issue. We what we've done is the church has been silenced on certain issues by giving it a label of being political. Right?
that goes into the spiritual battle you talked about a second
Absolutely.
ago. That's part of the big deal, because with this big distraction of separating politics from decisions of normal believers, that's going to affect, these decisions affect multiple individuals, as Andrew mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. And so that's the first.
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's the delay. You got it. It's all you.
I was just going to say so both aspects of this. Yes, the big, politics is the big front, but also it's because this big decision, this big thing going on is affecting the individuals on an individual basis, because it's directing where we are going as a nation.
Absolutely. And so I will give you the second point I would make on that is that because there is no such thing as a political issue, there are just issues in general for a believer and for a church. What we have to ask ourselves then is, which issues concern God, right? So if our government decided next week, you know what, we no longer want to drive on the right side of the road, we would like to change that law and make everybody drive on the left side of the road, I don't think Jesus really cares.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for me, I'm like, whatever, dude. However, if our government says, yeah, we're going to define marriage as whatever you want it to be, it can be a man and a woman and a woman, I have issue with that, and I'm going to say something because I have to, because I'm a Christian and it is my responsibility to speak truth.
And did Jesus tell us to do that?
Jesus absolutely told us to do
He
that.
told his disciples to give to Caesar's what Caesar's and what's God's, and that's exactly what he meant by that.
Yep. And I don't like the fact that I have to pay taxes, but I do it because Jesus obviously didn't care about that. He paid taxes. Drives me nuts. But at the same token, then Jesus also told them that they're all a bunch of hypocrites, a bunch of whitewashed sepulchres. He marked those that were deceivers of doctrine.
The Sanhedrin.
Mm-hmm. And that's the second point that we miss with this whole separation of church and state, is that we can't be involved because it's political, and that's a lie. But what we can do, where we can get overwhelmed with it, is we take issue with everything, even the things that don't concern Christ. Like, what side of the road are we driving on? I don't care, right? Jesus doesn't care. The sad part about that is that most of the issues that are coming up right now are designed to be an attack, and a spiritual attack.
It is a spiritual attack
On the truth of what God has established. So for the church then to say, this is the third point I'll make, for the church then to say that we cannot be involved in political issues, I think is a political decision.
It is.
It is. It is absolutely a political decision, and there is a hypocrisy in that, and that is what's wrong with the church today. It's not, to get away from the word politics. Okay, we're not going to talk about politics, but we are going to discuss every single issue that we're facing right now. We're going to be involved with that. But is there anything any more political than saying, well, these issues I'm not going to talk about, but these are? That sounds just like all the Republican and the Democrat parties right now. They have a handful of issues they talk about, and over here they don't want to talk about these. And the church has become a political party.
Yep.
And that's asinine. It's nonsense.
That is not what was intended.
Not at all.
And we got to go back and figure out or understand what separation of church and state actually is.
See, and you got to keep in mind when we're talking about this too, the church does not represent the church. The church doesn't represent the individual. It's Raining. The church represents Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. And the truth. And so what opened my eyes to this more than anything, I've harped on it for a long time, and it's what actually got us all started doing this right now, and the whole stupid COVID thing. When our government came in and told us that I couldn't go open my own business, when they told me that I was not allowed to go to my own church, man, I didn't even realize how subtle the spiritual battle had been and how much ground Satan had actually taken in our government and through our government, and therefore through our government, of our people, of our churches, of our religion. He is chiseling it away a little at a time. All the while the church is sitting there saying, well, it's a separation of church and state and we shouldn't be involved.
And it's used incorrectly. Yeah. Been deceived.
Do you have I know we don't have a separation of church and state document. Doesn't exist.
No, but I have James Madison's quote.
But we have James Madison's quote. Read James Madison's quote.
The purpose of separation of church and state is to keep forever from these shores, being America, the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soil of Europe in blood for centuries. And so what was that? I'm going to go through the story real quick.
Go ahead.
I'm going to try to make it quick. James Madison was an Anglican, and to understand what that was, it's like a hybrid Catholic, okay? These Catholics believed that each church was responsible for themselves. They have a pastor to God. They didn't believe that one man, being the Pope, had authority over all the churches. They didn't think it was biblical. So that's what an Anglican is. But what happened in Europe, King Henry, during that time, there was, we know who Martin Luther is, the Lutheran Church that has his namesake, right? Mm-hmm. And he was part of the Protestant movement in Europe, in England. And the King Henry wrote a lot of letters and statements against that. He was a Catholic, devout Roman Catholic. And the Pope gave him a title he named Defender of the Faith. It's Pope Leo. So him and the Pope were pretty tight. But the problem with Henry VIII is that he had 6 children. 5 of them died in infancy. Only 1 survived. It was a daughter, and he didn't have a son as his heir. So he went to the Pope, and he wanted his marriage annulled because he thought it was ill-fated. It was jinxed. And the Pope said no. Can't do that. Not biblical. So Henry got mad. Mm-hmm. And he turned around. He went and got another woman pregnant so he could have a kid secretly. Then married her anyhow secretly. And to fix the whole thing, he wrote into law that he was the ultimate authority over the Catholic Church and England. That's what James Madison is talking about. Mm-hmm. That's what the separation of church and state is. Mm-hmm. The government will not have authority over the church.
Exactly.
That's all it is. And then when they sit down to write the Constitution, you had Baptists, Presbyterians, mm-hmm. Anglicans. They were all different denominations. The biggest discussion that they had was, well, which denomination is right? And they said, well, none of them. We're not going to do that. The government cannot tell, this is a Christian nation. We're all Christians. This is a Christian document, mm-hmm. but we're not going to tell each person what denomination is superior over the other.
We have that now.
Yep.
It's do you believe in a pre-rapture, a pre-tribulation rapture? Do you mid-tribulation rapture? None of that matters as Christian brothers and sisters. There's only one important thing, and that is Jesus is the only way to get to heaven. That God is the creator of the universe and the world that's in it. And that's where all these people, they all had that same mindset, but they just had differences in interpretation of what Scripture said in other areas that were not as, I'm not going to say they're not important, because I think that everything in Scripture is important, but some of it we're just not made to understand, and we won't until we get to heaven, right? And I'm okay with that. But what you end up having is after all this stuff took place, and you had states, right? The government said, we're not involved with that. The federal government in particular, and the states, are supposed to be run by themselves. The federal government is not in charge of the states, by the way, which is another thing that blows my mind. People think the federal government runs the states, and that's a lie. Every state is individual. They do what they want to. The federal government's there anyway, that's another topic.
They set it up just like the churches.
Like the churches, mm-hmm. Exactly. But some states were trying to force a particular set of beliefs in that religion onto the people. In fact, they were even taxing some of them, like a church tax, right? And the people got upset about it. They were like, whoa, we're supposed to be able to worship freely. And we're not. We're being forced to do it the way these leaders are telling us to. And they're like, no, you can't do that. Separation of church and state. It was a one-way type of decision, a one-way interpretation. There's one of these articles that said it right. The Establishment Clause, that's where it came from. So it's not as necessarily a separation of church and state, but there are amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and things like that also. First Amendment, 14th Amendment, that's where the Establishment Clause comes from. And basically what it says is it separated the church from the state, but not religion from politics or public life. Mm-hmm. Individual citizens are free to bring their religious convictions into the public arena, right or wrong. Doesn't matter.
Regardless of what Hindus...
It doesn't matter.
Muslims, doesn't matter.
It's free will. The founding fathers refused to mess with free will, which God had given us. That's an important statement, right? This is where the people have been manipulated. But the government is then prohibited from favoring one religious view over another religious view, even favoring religion over non-religion. The government is not allowed to do that. That's not what the purpose of the government was. The government was there by the people, of the people, to make sure we were able to maintain our freedoms. That's what it was for. And then we had the freedom of free will. And in the beginning, we all chose the same thing because we were pretty grounded. But Satan knew that. I mean, I've asked a couple of people this question. Would it be too broad of a statement to say that when America was first founded that we became like the light of the world, like the church of the world?
No, not at all. Not at all. And what you were saying, too, and bringing up other religions, that's the argument a lot of people use. Well, it can't be a Christian document, and they couldn't have been a Christian nation because they allowed any kind of religion you wanted. The founding fathers understood free will, but the Constitution was written on the natural law. That's what they call it. And what is the natural law?
The Ten Commandments.
Exactly, but it's that conviction from the Holy Spirit that every man has.
Yeah.
Okay, it's about morals. God created Adam with these things. Every man's born of it. So the founding fathers said, look, it don't matter if you're Hindu, what you are. Mm-hmm. God created you with it, so you can't argue it. All right? We all have it. God said he wrote it on their hearts. So what they said is what we have to do is protect that. That's
Yep.
what they wanted to protect. And it didn't matter which religion you were. Yes, you come to this nation. It's all based, our Constitution is based on the Bible. We set it up as God told Moses to set up Israel as far as the structure. And here are the natural laws. And we are here to protect those. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yep. It was the
Doesn't
same
matter.
thing with the children of Israel. God told them what was right, but he didn't force it on them.
Exactly. And
You
that's
see
what
how many times over and over again they chose other religions, and they were wrong. And they suffered consequences for that, which is, by the way, was why our nation is on the way down right now. It's a consequence of us walking away from him. And so to say that we are okay with other religions is a broad statement. We're okay with free will. You're able to choose. We can't take that away from you. God did write on every man's heart a desire to find God. There is a God awareness that we all gain at a certain age in life where we become more curious and ask questions, and it's up to us to seek truth. It's up to the ones who do know the truth to tell the truth, to make sure those seeking the truth can find the right truth and not some manipulation of it, which is what a lot of these other religions are. And so while they're protecting the free will of a person to decide, they have to allow the bad ones in, otherwise they won't understand the thing of grace and love and everything else that comes along with following Christ. You see what I mean? But it was a keep the government away from forcing one religious belief on an entire group of people. It was not that an entire group of people in a religion were supposed to be quiet and not be involved with the government. That was, in fact, that was probably the opposite of what they had hoped with their intent in the very beginning.
they had absolute intentions of this being a Christian nation, and only Christians could serve in government.
Yep.
Only. As a matter of fact, it goes back to oaths. The founding fathers believed, and I'm not going to read all this stuff because I have so much of it. I guess somehow or another I'll get it all compiled and we'll put it where people can read it for themselves. Yeah. The founding fathers said making an oath is biblical. It's a contract that you have with God.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, if you're an atheist or a secular, it's impossible for you to make an oath with God. You can't take an oath.
Makes sense.
It's useless. Therefore, you cannot serve in government. This went on. It was true in court. The way they set it up in the judicial system, if you went to court to testify, even today, you swear on a Bible. The founding fathers said, the Bible tells us that we can't take the word of one witness. There must be two. So if you go in and you're testifying for yourself, you make an oath with God. One, you swear on the Bible. And secondly, you're saying, I'm testifying for myself as a witness, and God's my witness. That's why they make you swear on the Bible.
But they're even taking that away.
That's the way they've even taken that away. It was 1961 in Maryland that a governor appointed a man to be a notary in 1961. And they jumped up and said, you can't do it because you've professed that you don't believe in God. You're an atheist. In 1961, it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court overturned it. It's not been that long ago. That's how much of this has been put into the Constitution, not only of the United States, but in states themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This was a Christian nation, whether people like it or not.
It is. It's the subtlety of the spiritual battle, and it happened even so in the garden when Satan shows up and starts to try to tempt Eve and Adam in the garden. And it was very much a very, very slight deviation from what the actual truth was. So slight that if you just read those words really quickly, you might not even see the difference, right? And that's what's happened over time. Our nation is very, very young, right, compared to all the rest of the world. 300, less than 300 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the United States was set up, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that we became the Christian light of the world. It was a Christian nation, therefore basically like the hub church, so to speak, almost. All the rest of them had already fallen away, right? And so we set up this establishment, and Satan knew it. And how it was set up, that's where the attack showed up. It's just like any time you try to do something for God. Do you ever get attacked for trying to make a forward progress for God and His Word or His ministry? Absolutely, right? That's one of the ways you know that you're still in the battle, is because of the resistance that you have sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. But on that front, where it started, another place where it started, it was even after World War II. I mean, we had made it a long time that way, with little bitty steps that no one noticed, and the manipulation of the separation of church and state things, the Establishment Clause, and what role government had in churches and what role churches had in government, until you get to a court case in 1947 of Everson versus the Board of Education. And that the court held that the Establishment Clause is one of the liberties that was protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, making it applicable to state law and local ordinances. And so, since the court has attempted to discern the precise nature of this separation of church and state, that's what this article says. These are the things whenever it started to become, I guess, out in the open, in the physical. We began to see the spiritual battle in the physical realm through these type court cases. And so because it became a physical thing where we could actually see it and become more aware of it, up until the early 1900s, we hadn't even been paying it attention. We just went on the fact that, okay, the government shouldn't influence the church, but the church should absolutely influence the government. But since then, since the early 1900s, as one of these court cases after another, this spiritual battle is trying to tell us that nope, that's not how it should be. What we should say is that no politics and church at all. No government influence from the church, no government influence on the church. We're just going to completely divide those two things 100%. You can be a member of the church and you can be a Christian in this half of your life, over here on the left, but don't ever bring that over into this part of your life.
I think that's one of the best examples you can give is the school.
It is.
Government cannot fix. Government cannot save. Only Jesus Christ can save.
Absolutely.
Government cannot fix where the world is today. We can only do that through preaching to God. Go out and make disciples all over the world. I mean, that's how we have to do it. However, you just pointed out, and everybody can see this, that there's a spiritual war. And this whole thing about separation of church and state, why Christians should be involved in politics, is because they're engaging in the spiritual war.
Absolutely.
We're fighting against false prophecy, false teachings,
indoctrinations.
That's
why they went after the schools, so they could if they could get to the schools to get religion and God out of our schools. Which, by the way, did it work? Yeah, it worked. Now we don't have God in schools. How much harder is it now to reach a younger generation and tell them the truth about God than it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago? It's exponentially growing, the difficulty of trying to convince a younger generation, one after another, that God is real and it is true, because we've taken all that away. We've told them that it doesn't matter because the government said so. And the government says that I, as a church member, as a believer in Jesus Christ, I am not allowed to be influential on any of these type of governmental type areas. Point of clarity, by the way. I would have total objection to bringing even my favorite president so far, Donald Trump, to our church to speak for any reason whatsoever.
None.
That is wrong.
Nope. Should not be there. Politics should not be in there.
It's not a political grandstand. We go to church to worship, and we don't even do that right. Don't even get me started on that. You know what I mean? We're lackadaisical and happy. We just sit around like lots on the log, and we just, that ain't worship. But anyway, you definitely shouldn't bring the politics in. However, inside the churches where we discuss these issues, we get these type of issues all the time, right? How many times have at our church a Christian pays his bills? A husband loves his wife like Christ loved the church. Mm-hmm. A woman respects her husband. We get discussion on all these issues. However, if it's an issue that seems to be more political than another, well, we're not allowed to talk about that right
now. Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island, wrote back in 1644 in the Blaudy tenet of persecution for cause of conscience discussed. He wrote, talking about this topic, he said, all civil states with their officers of justice in their respective constitutions and administrations are proved essentially civil, and therefore not judges, governors, or defenders of the spiritual or Christian state and worship. It is the will and command of God that since the coming of his Son, Lord Jesus, a permission of the most paganist, Jewish, Turkish, or anti-Christian consciences and worships be granted to all men in all nations and countries, and they are only to be fought against with that sword which is only in soul matters able to conquer, to wit, the sword of God's Spirit, the Word of God. And he says a little farther down, God requireth not a uniformity of religion to be enacted and enforced in any civil state, which enforced uniformity sooner or later is the greatest occasion of civil war, ravishing of conscience, persecution of Christ Jesus and his servants, and of the hypocrisy and destruction of millions of souls. Forget who it was. It was either, I was reading it after Samuel Adams or Thomas Jefferson. I think they both had a very similar view, but the point was government was not to control the church and worship so that our worship of God could be sincere and not corrupted by the government. And that was the separation. It was not to cause a rift between the two. It was, we as believers should be active in the government, yet the government should not control or force a specific religion. Worship is free will, just like the foundation of the country, freedom, liberty for the individual. That's the same. That's how God made it with in the Bible. God, like you said a minute ago, God gave us free will. He doesn't want a bunch of robots worshiping him. He wants it to be a choice.
Exactly. Whose job then does it become? Because if it's not the church as a body to endorse political candidates and things like that, because we go to our church to worship, whose job then does it become to influence the world for Christ's sake? And that's the Christian.
The individual Christian.
It's the individual believer. And that's why we have a government that is of the people, for the people, by the people. It is individuals that make up this government, or are supposed to. We're losing that right now, losing it bad. Because if we had individuals that were able to speak freely about the truths that are in the Bible, we could then influence the way the government was run. But right now they're shutting us out and they're telling us to be quiet. It is a silencing that's coming from the spiritual realm. I read another little article here that says, the common life of humanity is part of the church's concern because it is part of God's concern. And in these days, especially, it is important that people should be reminded that all life, political, social, economic, and industrial, must be subject to the laws of God. This is why Christians need to be involved in who governs our nation and how its laws impact the future.
What's that really sad about it? We keep saying to influence, to influence, to influence. That's not how the founding fathers set it up.
To be.
They set it up that only Christians could serve in government. That's how they intended.
Yep.
And here's something that trying to find his name. I don't know that I wrote his name down anyhow. It was talking about a religious test, and they use that all the time. Religious test actually means, and what it meant in those days was what denomination of Christianity you are. It had nothing to do with whether you're a Christian or you're a Muslim, okay? It was what denomination of Christianity. But there was a legal scholar at Yale that was complaining in the Yale Law Journal in the 1930s, and he was a secular progressive. And these are the things he complained about in the 1930s, is that the nation was a Christian nation. And here's some things he listed. 1, Christianity was the foundation of the law. 2, official oaths were founded on Christian beliefs. 3, marriage was a Christian legal institution, being one man and one woman. 4, Sunday laws evidenced our nation's Christian character. Number 5, blasphemy laws acknowledged Christianity as our nation's foundation. And 6, Bible reading and prayer prevailed in the public schools.
Mhm.
This was in the 1930s. He was complaining about it. Look how far we've come in just a short amount of time, because Christians, Christ followers, have been kicked out of government.
Mhm.
And who allowed that to happen? The church.
Yep. Because of the spiritual battle, man.
Spiritual battle.
Billy Graham said, "We have forgotten that our nation grew strong in an era when moral standards were emphasized. It has grown weak because we condone that which once was commended. The secret strength of a nation is found in the faith that abides in the hearts, homes, and families. We must return to the faith of our fathers."
Yep.
You got some more notes? What you got?
So, should the Church of America fall?
So, should it fall? A lot of times the children of Israel never realized what was going on until they fell.
Yeah.
They should not fall, because God will tell us in his word that if you completely depend on me all the time, I will keep you from falling.
Mhm.
We've made a choice to walk away from that. So
Yep.
probably we will fall. We're on the way down now.
And that's what I wrote down. Like, the Israelites, whenever they were free, they were weak spiritually, like big time weak. But whenever they were captives, God heard their prayers. And,
Yep.
they were praying and they were strong. And so,
Time to wake up.
would it, like,
They always had a prophet or somebody running around screaming his head off like, "You guys are being dumb. Pay attention to what God said in the first place." That's what the League of Logic's doing, by the way. We're like pulling our hair out. Like, what is wrong with you people? Can you not see what's going on around you?
yeah.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but persecution does make you stronger.
Yep. And it's like your dad says it sometimes, that God sets up kings and takes down kings. That doesn't mean that every leader, world leader, is predestined by God and we have no, we still vote. It means God handles things like that sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
You get too far away, he's going to teach you a lesson.
He will allow evil people to come in there and give you the smackdown, so you'll go back to depending upon him.
Yep.
Yep.
That was something.
You talk about
Go ahead, Brian.
you talk about the church, falling, or does it need to fall to woken up? And I thought it interesting about, you mentioned the Everson versus Board of Education. In that court trial or whatever it was, what was being talked about was actually a Catholic school that was involved there. Samuel Adams wrote in The Rights of the Colonists as Men, he was talking about that, about the government should be tolerant of, he used the word toleration, of religion, for the freedom of religion. And talking about that, he says the only sects which he thinks ought to be, and which by all wise laws are excluded from such toleration, are those who teach doctrines subversive of the civil government under which they live. The Roman Catholics or Papists are excluded by reason of such doctrines as these: that princes excommunicated by may be disposed, and those that they call heretics may be destroyed without mercy, besides their recognizing the Pope in so absolute a manner in subversion of government by introducing as far as possible into the states under whose protection they enjoy life, liberty, and property, that solecism in politics, imperium imperio, leading directly to the worst anarchy and confusion, civil discord, war, and bloodshed. I think Thomas Jefferson talked about it as well. And it seems, what I'm trying to say here is that you can see this in the movies that we see a lot these days, and in the mainstream media. The Catholic Church has snuck in to try to represent Christianity. Yeah. And to represent that Christian, nation that we started as, and that's not it. Catholicism is not Christian.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not the basis of our country. It's not the religion that we were founded on. It was even spoken against by our founding fathers.
Yeah, founding fathers have been through that before. That's why
That's why they're here.
the Anglicans were formed.
That's what they got away
yeah,
from.
Yep.
The other interesting thing about that is as they go through these cases with the Board of Education and stuff too, it's because it all seemed like they were doing the right thing to start with. This is how subtle the spiritual attack was. They decided later on then that the government, right at the beginning, everyone had the right to an education. Remember that? And so the government, as a whole, the federal government, was providing funds to individual states for educational funds. The states were taxing, and they were using taxes to pay for education. And they were buying things like books and things. And if you were a religious school or a private school, the government would still fund for you the secular books like math or science, or maybe not science anymore. So one time science was even secular, and it still believed God created everything, by the way. The Big Bang is a very new idea. But let's just use math. So you can get your math book. The government would pay for it. It didn't matter if you were a public school, a private school, or a Christian school, because the government said everybody has the right to a certain amount of education. Well, then the government said, man, there's some of these religious schools that are taking our money. They're teaching math, but they're not teaching solid Christian values. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take away our finances from those schools. And it almost seemed on the surface as, well, that's kind of a noble idea. Why would we want to fund a school that was teaching someone to be a terrorist? But really, I got to pee. But really what's happening is it is one step of the government taking God out of the educational system by not allowing schools. Some of those schools have probably had to fold up. I don't know, you know what I mean? But it becomes difficult. I know that what Christian schools we have locally here, I don't know that they're all, I'm sure they're all doing okay, but I don't think they are so financially stable that they're not worried about what's going to happen next year, Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's a subtle war, man.
It is a subtle war. And I want to make sure that people don't think we're saying that we need to get out and start protesting or anything like that. Jesus never did that.
Nope.
But he was politically confronted all the time by the Pharisees and Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, with political questions they were trying to catch him up in. And he used scripture every time. All the time. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to stand up and use God's word to fight in the spiritual war, which is our sword. And we need to do it in the halls of Congress. That's where it needs to be. Mm-hmm. A big part of it.
This is true, man.
I kind of feel like we were blessed. God blessed this country. We were holding all the cards.
Yep.
Every bit of them. And the Christians just the church said, I fold. Threw their hands up and walked away.
Yep.
And I don't think God's happy about it.
For political correctness.
Mm-hmm.
PC.
Exactly.
Dumb.
We can change that.
We can.
We need to get in the game.
Don't give up the fight, man.
No.
It is a natural tendency of people to choose the easy route, and I think that's what happened. Multiple people over a long period of time choosing the easy route, not stepping up and speaking up in the decisions that shape the country. And I'm guilty of this myself.
Yeah.
I think there are multiple factors. If you take the view of 30,000 foot above, Satan needed to take this country out.
Absolutely.
Because it was a light unto the world.
Mm-hmm.
It was all plotted, and he hit from every direction. It's coming from everywhere. It's not just one single thing.
Yep. He's a master at it.
That's what would confuse me. Why would he want to do that? Because if he takes the Church of America out, we know what will happen. The same thing is happening in China. Christianity is blowing up in China. So why would you want to take off the board the weakest Christians there are and make them strong.
So a Christianity in China is blowing up in an individual world in the underground. However, on a world scale in politics, in government affairs, China is ruling the world. And it is not influenced by Christianity whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so this is, we'll get into this too, because this is the big aspect, but just keep it in mind. Where does the Antichrist set up a throne? It's inside the government, a one world order, a one world government. You see what I mean? And this is why.
And America's standing in the way right now.
America's government is standing in the way. It has to be taken down. And man, they just get the chilly bumps just talking about it all, because that's where, I mean, the battle right now is raging so hard, and we're at a point right now. People woke up maybe just a little bit too late, I'm afraid, right? But over the past 12 months, there have been a ton of people who have finally realized that stuff is not right.
Yeah.
You see what I
Something
mean?
ain't right.
Something ain't right, but we've been conditioned and trained so much in that, well, we're not allowed to. Yeah, I know I'm hearing
Man, it is pouring down, dude.
hearing the rain come in through
This
the
is
microphone.
a storm.
We've been conditioned and trained so much as individuals and as citizens of a nation that we are not allowed to religiously speak out in any government capacity. That it may be too late for us to, but that is no reason to quit fighting.
Agreed.
Noise.
That's loud. That's pouring down, man.
Yeah.
Hailstorm.
What do you think?
It still doesn't make, like, I understand what you're saying, but it still doesn't make sense to me. You know, if America falls, then that's just one more step closer towards the end where we all get to spend, well, not everybody, but where we get to spend, you know, the rest of our days, Christians do, with Jesus.
Right.
And so, like, obviously you have your responsibilities to your government and to your job, like we were saying earlier. But if America falls, then you only have devout Christians throughout America, or throughout the countries. You know, everybody knows where they stand. And then it's the end game. So why it just doesn't make sense. Like, I'm trying not to say, yes, America falls so we can get it all over with and bam, we go to heaven.
Yeah, that's
I think
kinda,
the thing here is that we are to occupy till he comes. We're not to stop fighting before the fight's over.
But why
that's
would
the
we?
thing here? We know what the end is going to happen. You know, God wrote about it in his book, what's going to happen in the end. But in the meantime, we're supposed to be speaking up for truth. We're supposed to be being a light ultimately for the gospel, and not stop and give up before it's time.
You definitely shouldn't give up. But why would you portray the government taking over as a negative thing if it leads toward the end game?
because it's against God's will.
Right. He never wants you to quit fighting for the truth.
And the government, our government, should be fallen because it's we the people makes up the government.
That's right.
We the people. So that's me and you, comes out of your paycheck. And God instructs we the people on how government is to operate in a society so we do not have another Genesis 6.
Exactly.
So if you're not doing that, you're not doing God's will. That's
Absolutely.
why we need to be doing it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's it right there.
Well,
And
the
that's
last Genesis 6 is Christ coming back.
we get that. But what he's saying is that
Yeah, but you love your neighbor as you love yourself. Go out and teach the nation, make disciples. You're supposed to be doing that, not saying, oh, well, God's going to come or Jesus is coming back. I don't have a problem with it. If you love your neighbor like you love yourself, everyone that's out there's not saved. You're like, uh-oh, you don't have much time. We got to hurry up.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely go out. I'm not saying shirk your responsibilities because something down the line is going to handle it.
But the responsibility of government to have a society where that's available and free
It's
is our responsibility.
You can't skirt that one either.
That's why he told
you can't skirt your responsibility of being involved in the government for the sake of allowing the government to fall, because then you have disobeyed what God told you to do.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be disobedient during this time.
And I'm not saying shirk your responsibilities or don't be active in the government. I think more Christians do need to be active in the government. But it seems like everything's going according to plan.
Well, it can, but that still, Paul told us to put on the whole armor of God.
Yeah.
And he said it's not flesh and blood we fight, it's principalities, right? Satan doesn't know he's going to lose in the end. He doesn't believe that. He said in his heart, I'll rise above God. And he's still trying. And so are his angels. So this is an ongoing war, and we're supposed to be fighting in that. Satan ain't like, he might say, you know, it's getting close to the end, but I'm going to get this done before the end. I'm going to win. Yeah. He's still in it to win. So we are engaged in a war. We're supposed to be engaged in that war.
If you think about it like this, and I think this is what made one of the things that made Paul such a strong Christian. If you realize and you truly believe, yep, one day Christ is coming back and we're going to win, and I'm part of his team, and so I get to spend eternity with him in glory, man, that should give you all the confidence in the world to stand up as a Christian and be bold in the faith, in the face of a government that is trying to push you down, to stand up to that government with faith and boldness. This is the truth. The government is wrong. The school system is wrong. Your individual life is wrong. All based on God's word. If we're not coming back to a God's word centered on the whole thing, we've missed it anyway. And so we are given responsibilities as men, because here we are, we're just men. We're given responsibilities in our families, things we're supposed to do. If our marriage is on the rocks and it's going out and our wife is gone, we don't change our responsibilities. We still do them anyway. We're given responsibilities at our employer. Doesn't matter if our employer is a jerk. Doesn't change what our responsibilities are. We're supposed to do it. The same thing applies to our government. It makes no difference if the government is on the way up or on the way down. We are given responsibilities as believers to be a light in the world and to influence that, to be in control of that, to be honest with you, of that government based on God's word and his truth. It doesn't matter what directions it's going. Yes, it is inevitable. We have a book that tells us that one day all of it is going to end. But Paul never quit going, and he instructs us to keep pressing towards the mark, to push on, man. It's going to get hard. It's going to get worse, but don't stop doing everything you know is right just for the sake that, well, it's all going to end now. You see what I mean? It should be more motivation now than ever before. It doesn't have to end now. We don't know when it's going to end. We should live like he's coming back tomorrow. We should live like we got eternity here on earth as well. And I'll tell you why. Because there's other people that need to be saved. We're not the only ones. And if we can influence our government and turn it back around and shine a light, and it all be done with the glory of God in mind so that he receives glory for what happens, then we've influenced a whole lot of people then that they have opportunity now to be saved, right? God tells us if we will maintain his commandments and do the things that we're supposed to do, he will keep us from falling. I believe that applies to our family. I believe it applies to our work, and I believe it applies to our government and our politics. If we all do those things as believers, if the church as a whole would quit being a silent sissy on all these issues because it seems politically incorrect, we could change things and we could influence things if the church would only do what it's supposed to do in the world on a day-to-day basis.
Not in the church. Politics again doesn't belong in the church. Well, but I want to throw something to Andrew again. We're doing this podcast. You remember the one on moral relativism?
Yeah.
Who's pushing that?
Who's pushing
moral relativism? The schools, the government. Andrew, you've already been in this fight. Everything we've done in this podcast, that's what we're doing. I mean, we're actively doing it right now. That's why it's important. If everything about this podcast that is important to you, there you have it. That's why we do it.
We have the greatest ability to be effective for teaching the gospel in a free country. We have the freedom to speak in this podcast that we're doing right now. We have the freedom to go out and talk to our neighbors about the gospel. We have freedom of religion, freedom of speaking, that does not happen. That's not free and able to do that over in a communist nation.
I don't know if y'all
So while
remember. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We should take advantage of that in spite of culture being lazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all remember in the little thinking book. Remember the thinking book? In the very beginning, I had questions. How do we change what's going on in our nation? Well, right now, it's being controlled by a government. So that means that's where we have to change it. Well, how do we change a government? Well, we got to change the people who are in it. Well, how do we change the people who are in it? Well, we got to vote differently based on biblical principles. Well, how do we get people to vote differently for biblical principles? Well, we have to start telling them the truth and show them the lies that are inside the government. And how do we tell people the truth and show them the lies that are inside the government? Oh, we should start a podcast.
Yep.
We should live our lives every day like we believe the junk that we're talking about on this podcast. Now, you want to give yourself a little bit of fuel on Sundays and Wednesdays when you do go to church. Worship like you're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget who it is that you're serving. And, man, there's power that comes that will push you along the way to be able to do the things every day to influence people for the glory of God so that they can see the lies that are being told all around them. Right?
But don't just leave it up to us.
Don't just leave it up to us. Do something.
You're a Christ follower. Get out there and do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What else we got? We good?
You still with
I'm
us,
good.
Brian?
Brian's still there. All right. More on this to come in the next episode.
Yep.
Got anything else? Any closing comments?
No closing comments.
Are you sure?
I feel like we're missing each other, but we're kind of talking about the same thing.
Yeah, we are.
But yeah, I don't know.
We're
Never
saying-
miss an opportunity to keep your mouth shut if you don't know what you're talking about.
Better to remain silent and have people think that you're dumb rather than open your mouth and prove them all right.
Exactly.
I should probably follow that advice more often. There's no doubt.
Thank you for listening to the League of Logic podcast. If anything said has made you think or made you mad, please check it out for yourself. I want to be clear here because I've said this, many times before. We're not looking to make anyone mad. We want to speak the truth, and we want you to look for and know the truth. If you haven't already, please leave us a rating and review. It would help us out a lot in promoting what we're doing. Also, we have a store that is available. You can access it through our website, leagueoflogic.com. You get t-shirts, hoodies, other logo items. Thank you again for listening to the League of Logic podcast. We look forward to you tuning in on the next episode. I don't think you look dumb, Andrew. I think I can see both aspects of this.
I look great.
I don't think you look dumb either.
But it sounded almost like Robin was calling you dumb right there at the end.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
That's
I-
all right.
I didn't mean to
I
call
don't
you
think
dumb.
that was meant.
No, it was not. I'll apologize on the next episode just to be sure nobody else thought
Fellas,
that.
it don't bother me.
No,
Water
I think
on
it
a
was
duck's
good
back.
conversation of two aspects of something. I don't think anybody was wrong there. I don't think you were wrong. It was good discussion.
No, I think you're
Yeah.
a deep thinker is what I think.
It just doesn't make sense to me. Like America, and I don't know of many like true Christians that would deny this fact, but America Christianity is super, super weak.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
extremely weak.
That
Yep.
is the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Agreed.
However, actual Christians, you should not you shouldn't shirk your responsibility at all. You need to keep doing what you're told to do. Just because you think you have a better idea than God, that you need to do what God tells you to do. But I don't know why we would portray the government taking over as they are in such a short period of time as a bad thing. It's just something that's happening to me,
Because it's against God's will and instruction.
Well, the question then becomes
Biblically.
is why is it happening?
Secondly,
Happening
why?
because it's our fault as believers.
It's
not-
definitely
Go
It
ahead.
is a direct reflection on the Christian people of the nation.
Yeah.
Consequence. The same reason that Israel got beat up so many times because of they shirked their response because they failed to love God the way they were supposed to. It is the litmus test for how we are living as Christians in our nation.
Yeah.
And then they turned around and God handed it to the Gentiles, which is us.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're holding the candle, and we're doing the same thing Israel did, basically.
but we've already failed.
No,
I mean,
war's not over.
the war is definitely not over, but we've lost so much ground to where we're almost at the end game and, keep doing what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
But I mean, this is how, we couldn't be perfect Christians forever. America was not going to last forever.
You're not
Nope.
saying to stop what you're doing. You're not saying to quit pursuing the goal of pushing the gospel. But you're basically making a prediction that it's too late. Is that what you're saying?
Not so much that it's too late. I don't think that we're going to fix ourselves. I don't think that's going to happen. But I just don't understand why we would portray it as bad. It just seems like something that's happening. I don't know if Brian just dropped off.
Yeah,
It's not-
I guess.
that's Roy
I
trying
guess
to call.
to your point,
It just seems like something that's happening. Why would you be doom and gloom about the government taking over whenever the government is going to do it?
Because it's not the government that's taking over.
Well, either way, why would you be doom and gloom about Satan taking over with the government if that's supposed to happen right before Jesus comes back?
Because we have compassion
Because
for all the
you're-
people that are still lost, and we want to give them as much time as possible.
Because
Yeah.
you and I are not the ones who makes the call when Jesus comes back.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility until that time. Even Jesus doesn't know. It's God who will say, wake him up in the middle of the night, send a servant out. And I'm going back to the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
He'll have a servant go wake him up in the middle of the night, and he'll say, you've done well, son, go get your bride. Okay, that's God's call. But in that meantime, God gives us instructions as
Mhm.
Christ followers,
Yeah.
as servants.
Mhm.
And part of that is government. He said, this is how you set up government. This is how you run government. So whose responsibility is it? Ours.
Yeah.
And as long as this government is being taken over by Satan, we're failing. We're not in the
Mhm.
war.
Well, we're failing on a grand scale, but not an individual, perhaps, for each person. If you're still doing what you're supposed to do.
But as an individual, you can't separate the two.
So let's just say that Andrew is doing everything he's supposed to do as an individual. Part of that list of the things that Andrew is supposed to do as an individual is also look at other Christians who are not doing what they're supposed to as individuals and say, stand up and do something,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we do all these things is because we should have, I know it's hard because I don't, we should have the compassion for the others that are still lost that Christ has for them and want them to know. And so we need to do two things. I'm going to say it this way, but you know what I'm saying. We got to buy as much time as possible before he gets here.
Yeah.
Right. And we can't make any more time, but I'm just saying, in the meantime, while we're waiting for his return, our goal in life, the first and foremost, is to make sure as many people as they can know the truth about Jesus Christ and can be saved.
Yeah.
Okay. We all agree with that, right?
Right.
That is the goal. All right. And so in satisfying that goal, what obstacles get in the way of people being able to believe that Jesus Christ is the only way to get into heaven? Well, there's lots of them, right? You got false religions. That's a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
You saw that with the Mormons.
We really shouldn't be having this conversation. We need to do this one.
Yeah.
You're wonderful, Andrew. I love the way you think, man. I
Perhaps
really
it's
do.
just, it's not necessarily a truth thing that I'm getting hung up on as much as it is just perspective. Perhaps
You're
glasses half empty,
saying the
glasses
same
half
thing that
full.
we are.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm.
Yeah.
It just, I guess, it's
So for me,
perspective.
I'll give you this part too, because I agree with you. I am ready for him to come back right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm sick and tired of dealing with the world.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of dealing with my flesh and my sin and my nastiness, and I can't beat it. And I know the only way to get over that is for him to come get me.
Yeah.
So for that aspect, please take over my government, crush this world, smash everything. Just put me up there in heaven where I can quit being in this battle.
But
But at the same time, if I have his compassion,
love your neighbor.
that
like
turns
yourself.
into selfishness because all I think about is me. And so I'm like Paul, man, I struggle with a lot of things, but because there are some that are still lost, I have to continue to press on in this life. And part of pressing on is fighting the battle in every front where I can. And one of the biggest raging battles right now is in the government realm. It is and the reason I say that is because our government has begun to influence our government, and our media are influencing people and teaching them how to think and telling them that God is not real.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. Please. I mean, Jesus coming back is absolutely a good thing. I want it. But at the same time, I don't want it. Said, what was it? Paul said something about, man, if I leave this place, that'd be awesome. But I really need to be here with you guys.
Crazy. It's a lot.
Cue the music.
Again. Yeah. All right. See you at church. You ain't going to church. Get well.
No, I'm they call me asystematic or something like that.
Did you test positive?
Actually, no, I didn't.
Oh.
I didn't get tested.
Oh yeah.
Since Megan had it, I figured by deduction I would just go ahead and just.
We've had an equipment
away.
malfunction.
So how are you asymptomatic if you ain't got it?
You know they make pills for that. Sorry, his mic stand fell.
Maybe it's asymmetric.
Yeah. I go.
Get back up.
Anyway,
all right, man. We'll see you later. Y'all get well.
all right.
Later.
Y'all have a good one.